Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about something that might sound a little intimidating at first.
Yeah.
Addison's disease.
Uh-huh.
But don't worry, we're going to break it down together.
Absolutely.
And by the end of this, you'll be a mini expert on Addison's disease.
That's right.
You shared some excerpts from an up-to-date article called Causes of Primary Adrenal Insufficiency, Addison's disease.
Yep.
So that's what we're going to be using to guide our exploration today.
It's going to be quite a journey.
I'm excited.
We're going to be going through medical history and how our understanding of Addison's disease has evolved over time.
Okay.
From the very first discovery of this disease all the way to what doctors know now.
I'm ready to jump in.
All right.
When I hear Addison's disease, the first thing I think of is tuberculosis.
Right.
Like, wasn't that the big scary cause way back when?
You're right on the money.
Okay.
Tuberculosis was the major culprit when Thomas Addison first described the disease way back in 1855. Wow, that's a long time ago.
It is.
So it's been around for a while.
Absolutely.
But here's where things get really interesting for me.
Yeah.
You know how we mentioned tuberculosis used to be the main cause? Well, as tuberculosis cases went down, so did Addison's disease.
Exactly.
Like they're directly correlated.
Yeah, they are.
And today, tuberculosis is only responsible for 7 to 20% of cases.
That's right.
Wow, that's a huge drop.
It is. It's pretty remarkable.
So what's the main cause now?
Well,
Have doctors found a new villain?
you might be surprised to learn that in most cases,
Okay.
it's your own immune system that's causing the trouble.
What?
It's called autoimmune adrenalitis.
Autoimmune adrenalitis.
And it accounts for a whopping 70 to 90% of Addison's disease cases today.
Hold on, so my own body could be attacking itself and causing Addison's disease.
That's exactly right.
That's kind of terrifying.
It is a bit of a strange concept, isn't it?
It is.
But basically, your immune system,
Yeah.
which is supposed to protect you, right?
Gets a bit confused
Right.
and starts attacking the outer layer of your adrenal glands, called the adrenal cortex.
So the adrenal cortex is like the outer shell of the adrenal gland.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
But how does that actually happen?
Yeah,
What causes the immune system to go rogue like that?
that's the million-dollar question.
Is it?
Scientists are still trying to figure out all the details.
Oh, okay.
What we do know is that in autoimmune adrenalitis,
Yeah.
your body produces these things called antibodies.
I've heard of antibodies.
You probably have.
Aren't those the good guys?
They're supposed to be.
Yeah.
They're like the warriors of your immune system.
Right.
You can think of them like tiny warriors programmed to attack a specific target. But in this case, they mistakenly target enzymes in your adrenal glands,
Oh,
leading to damage.
so they're like friendly fire
Yeah.
within my own body.
Exactly.
That's crazy. And these antibodies are attacking specific enzymes.
Right.
So it's not just a general attack. It's like they're going after
It's very specific.
specific targets.
Yeah.
Like,
And one of the enzymes that often gets targeted is called 21-hydroxylase.
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 Got it.
Researchers have found that if you have antibodies against this enzyme
Okay.
and your ACTH levels,
Now, ACTH, remind me what that is again.
that's a hormone
Oh, okay.
that stimulates cortisol production.
Right. Cortisol.
Cortisol, a stress
Yes.
hormone.
Yeah.
So if your ACTH levels start to rise,
Okay.
you're at a much higher risk of developing Addison's disease.
So that's an indicator
Yes,
that something's not right.
it's a warning sign.
Wait, so doctors can actually see this happening in blood tests?
Yes,
They can potentially predict who's going to get Addison's disease?
in some cases, yes.
That's incredible.
It is.
I mean, that's like a huge step forward in terms of
early detection.
early detection and prevention, right? So we've got this autoimmune attack on the adrenal glands, but is it ever part of a bigger problem?
That's a great question.
Like, could other things be going haywire in the body at the same time?
You're right. Sometimes autoimmune adrenal insufficiency isn't a solo act.
Okay.
It can show up alongside other autoimmune conditions.
So there might be other things going wrong, too.
Exactly.
Okay, and that's when we start talking about...
That's when we start talking about polyglandular autoimmune syndrome.
Okay, polyglandular autoimmune syndrome.
Yeah.
So break that down for me.
Okay.
What does that even mean?
Essentially, it means that the immune system is attacking multiple glands in your body,
Oh, okay.
not just the adrenal glands.
So it's like a multi-pronged attack.
Yes, exactly.
And there are different types of these syndromes.
There are two main types,
Okay.
type I and type 2.
Type I and type 2?
Type I, also known as APS1,
APS1, okay.
is quite rare.
Yeah.
And usually shows up in childhood.
So this is something that parents need to be aware of. So if it shows up in childhood, are there any early signs parents should watch out for?
Absolutely.
What should they be looking for?
One of the hallmark signs
Okay.
is chronic mucocutaneous candidiasis.
Whoa, hold on.
It is a mouthful.
That's a mouthful.
But-
I know. What does that actually look like?
Okay, so imagine this. A child has a fungal infection.
Like thrush.
Like thrush, exactly.
Okay.
But it keeps coming back.
Even with treatment?
Even with treatment.
Okay.
It often affects the mouth.
Uh-huh.
But it can also show up in other places.
Like
the nail beds.
Oh, wow.
So this persistent, stubborn candidiasis
Okay.
can be a red flag for APS-1.
Interesting. So chronic fungal infections, got it.
Yes.
But you mentioned there were other glands involved too, right?
You're absolutely right.
Besides just the adrenal glands.
Along with adrenal insufficiency.
Yeah.
Kids with APS-1 also often develop hypoparathyroidism.
Hypoparathyroidism, and that's where...
That means that the parathyroid glands, which are responsible for regulating calcium in the blood.
Calcium's important
Very important.
for bones and all sorts of things.
Absolutely.
So they're not working properly.
Exactly.
So are we talking serious calcium deficiencies, like the kind that cause rickets?
Not exactly rickets, but it can definitely cause problems.
Okay.
You might see things like muscle cramps,
Uh-huh.
tingling sensations,
Okay.
or even seizures because the calcium levels are out of whack.
Oh, wow. So it can be pretty serious.
It can be.
And this is all happening in childhood.
And to make things even more complex,
Oh, great.
the adrenal insufficiency part of APS-1 usually doesn't develop until later,
Oh, really?
maybe around ages 10 to 15.
So it's like a whole cascade of issues
It is.
hitting at different times.
Yeah.
This APS-1 sounds incredibly complex.
It is a complex condition.
So what causes all of this to happen?
Well, scientists have traced it back to a gene called AIR.
Air, okay.
When there's a mutation in this gene, the immune system basically loses its ability to recognize the body's own tissues as friendly.
So it's like the immune system's internal map gets all messed up.
That's a great way to put it.
And it starts attacking everything in sight.
Yeah, it can't distinguish between friend and foe.
That's wild.
It is.
So a single faulty gene
Yeah.
can throw the entire immune system into chaos.
It can have a huge impact.
That's incredible. But you mentioned there was another type
Yeah.
of polyglandular autoimmune syndrome, right?
Right.
Type 2.
Type 2 or APS-2
APS-2.
is more common than type I.
Okay.
And it usually shows up later in life,
Okay.
typically between the ages of 20 and 40.
So not something you'd typically see in kids then.
Not usually.
All right. And what's different about this one?
So unlike APS-1, which is purely genetic,
Okay.
APS-2 can be both familial, meaning it runs in families,
Mm-hmm.
and sporadic, meaning it could just pop up out of nowhere.
Oh, great. So you never know.
Exactly.
So if someone in my family has APS-2, I might be more likely to get it.
You are at increased risk,
Okay.
but it's not a guarantee.
Right. It's not like a one-to-one correlation.
Correct.
And is there anything else different about this one?
Yeah, here's another key difference.
Okay.
In APS-2, adrenal insufficiency is the main event.
Oh, okay.
It's often the first thing to show up,
Right.
and then it might be followed by other autoimmune disorders,
Like what?
like autoimmune thyroid disease
Oh, okay.
or type 1 diabetes.
Those are pretty common.
They are.
Yeah, I feel like I hear about those conditions all the time,
You're right, they are quite prevalent.
which is why this APS-2 is particularly relevant to a lot of people,
Exactly.
because those other conditions are so common.
Yes.
Okay, so we've covered how your own immune system can turn against you and cause Addison's disease.
Right.
But are there other ways to develop this condition?
You're absolutely right.
I mean, it can't just be autoimmunity, right?
There are other culprits out there,
Okay.
some of them pretty surprising.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I want to hear about those.
absolutely. Lay it on me. I want to hear all about these other surprising causes.
I will get to those right after the break. So, besides autoimmunity, what else could be causing Addison's disease?
Yeah, lay it on me. What are these other surprising causes?
All right, remember how we talked about tuberculosis being a major player in the past?
Yeah, way back in the 1800s.
Well, it hasn't entirely disappeared from the scene.
Oh, really?
We might be surprised to learn that infections, especially those that directly target the adrenal glands, can still lead to Addison's disease.
Wait, so even though we've gotten much better at treating tuberculosis, it can still mess with my adrenal glands?
It's true.
That's unsettling.
Tuberculosis is one of those infections that can actually cause the adrenal glands to become enlarged and even calcified.
Calcified.
You know how sometimes bones can become brittle and break easily?
Yeah.
Calcification is kind of like that,
Okay.
but it happens in soft tissues like the adrenal glands.
So it's like they're hardening. So it's like tuberculosis leaves its mark on the adrenal glands even after it's treated.
Exactly.
Can doctors actually see that happening?
Yes.
Like, is there a way to see those calcifications?
Doctors can actually see these changes in your adrenal glands using special scans.
Wow, so they can actually see the damage.
They can.
That's amazing.
It's pretty remarkable what medical imaging can do these days.
Okay, so tuberculosis is still a concern.
It is.
But what about other infections?
Yeah.
Could I get Addison's disease from, like, a random cold or flu?
That's a good question.
I mean, I feel like I'm always getting sick.
A typical cold or flu
Yeah.
is unlikely to cause Addison's disease.
Okay, good.
But there are other infections
Okay.
that can be more problematic.
Like what?
Fungal infections, for example,
Oh,
can sometimes affect the adrenal glands.
really?
We're talking about things like
Give me some examples.
histoplasmosis
Histoplasmosis.
and paracoccidioidomycosis,
Paracoccidioidomycosis.
which might sound like something out of a science fiction movie.
Yeah, those are some big words.
They are, but they're real infections.
Okay, those definitely don't sound like your average sniffles.
No, we're a bit more serious.
And I know we talked about HIV earlier.
Yes.
Could that also lead to Addison's disease?
You're remembering our earlier discussion perfectly.
I try.
HIV can indeed increase the risk of developing adrenal insufficiency,
Okay.
especially if the virus isn't well controlled.
So that's something to be aware of.
Absolutely.
So it's another piece of the puzzle to keep in mind.
It is.
Wow, it's like a whole army of infections is out to get my adrenal glands.
It seems that way, doesn't it?
But we've been talking a lot about chronic conditions,
Right.
things that develop over time. Are there any situations where Addison's disease can just appear suddenly?
You're in luck,
Oh, really?
because that's exactly what we're going to talk about next.
Okay, good.
It's not as common as the infectious or autoimmune causes,
Okay.
but it can be pretty dramatic.
Oh no, this is what I'm afraid of.
We call it hemorrhagic infarction.
Hemorrhagic infarction.
Yes.
That sounds intense.
It is a serious condition.
Okay, break that down for me.
Right.
What actually happens in my body when that occurs?
Picture this.
Okay.
The blood supply to your adrenal glands gets suddenly cut off.
Oh no.
Kind of like flipping a switch.
Like they just shut down.
Essentially.
Okay.
This can happen for a couple of reasons.
Okay.
Sometimes there's bleeding in the adrenal glands themselves.
Internal bleeding.
Yes.
Okay.
Or there could be a blood clot
A blood clot.
in the vein that's responsible for draining blood away from the adrenal glands.
So the blood can't get out.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
Either way, when the adrenal glands don't get the blood they need,
Yeah.
the tissues start to die,
And that leads to...
and that leads to acute adrenal insufficiency.
Okay, so it's like a sudden shutdown of the adrenal glands.
It is.
That's
It
terrifying.
can be a very serious situation.
Are there any warning signs?
It can be difficult to predict,
Oh, great.
but there are some risk factors to be aware of.
Okay, like what?
If you're on blood thinners,
Blood thinners. Okay.
have sepsis, which is a very serious infection,
Sepsis. Okay.
or are under extreme stress.
stress. Oh, great. So basically everything.
Well, those are just some of the risk factors.
Okay, so it's not something to obsess over.
No, but it's good to be aware.
But it's good to be aware of those risk factors.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered infections and this scary sudden shutdown.
We have.
What else is on the list of Addison's disease culprits?
We're not done yet.
Oh, there's more.
There are still a couple more things to talk about.
I'm almost afraid to ask.
This one might not come as a surprise.
Okay.
Metastatic disease.
Metastatic disease.
Yes,
Okay, so we're talking about a cancer now, right?
you got it.
All right, so cancer can cause Addison's disease.
Metastatic disease means cancer that is spread from its original location to other parts of the body.
Right, it metastasizes.
Exactly. And it turns out the adrenal glands are a popular destination
Oh, no.
for those wandering cancer cells.
Why is that?
They have a rich blood supply,
Okay.
which makes them an inviting place for cancer to set up shop.
So it's like those cancer cells are little travelers looking for a new home.
That's a great way to put it.
And my adrenal glands are like a cozy bed and breakfast with a vacancy sign flashing.
I like that analogy.
That's kind of scary.
It can be, but here's the important thing to remember.
Okay.
Just because cancer spreads to the adrenal glands
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean you'll develop Addison's disease.
Oh, okay. That's good.
It really depends on how much damage the cancer causes.
So it's not the cancer itself, but the damage it causes, that's the problem.
Exactly. If the cancer doesn't significantly disrupt the adrenal gland's ability to produce hormones,
Uh-huh.
you might not even notice any symptoms related to Addison's disease.
So if the cancer is small and localized,
Right.
I might not have any issues.
You're catching on quickly. If the cancer doesn't significantly disrupt the adrenal gland's ability to produce hormones,
Yeah.
you might not even notice any symptoms related to Addison's disease.
Okay, that's somewhat reassuring, I guess.
It is important to keep in mind that not everyone who has cancer that spreads to the adrenal glands will develop Addison's.
That's true.
Okay, so we've got infections, sudden shutdowns, and cancer.
Yeah, those are some pretty serious causes.
They are.
Any other surprises lurking in the shadows?
There's one more category that we haven't discussed yet.
Oh, great. I'm almost afraid to ask.
And it might surprise you. You're right to be a little wary. There's one more category that we haven't discussed yet, and it might surprise you. Drug-induced adrenal insufficiency.
What?
Yeah.
Are you telling me that simply taking certain medications could actually trigger Addison's disease?
That's right.
That blows my mind.
It's true. You have to remember that medications, even those that help us, can sometimes have unintended consequences.
Yeah.
Certain medications can interfere with your body's ability to produce cortisol, particularly if your adrenal glands are already a bit weak.
So if they're already compromised.
Right.
Ugh.
One example is etomidate,
Etomidate.
a medication used for anesthesia.
Oh, okay.
It can temporarily suppress cortisol production.
So even if it's just a temporary effect, it could still be a problem for someone who's already dealing with adrenal issues, right?
Exactly.
It's like kicking someone when they're already down.
You hit the nail on the head. It's all about that delicate balance.
Right.
And etomidate isn't the only culprit.
Oh, no.
Some antifungal medications like ketoconazole,
Ketoconazole.
fluconazole.
Fluconazole
Okay.
can also cause problems, as can other drugs like metirapone,
Metirapone, got it.
mitotane,
Mitotane.
and suramin.
Suramin, wow, okay, there's a lot of them.
There are quite a few.
It sounds like I need to be really careful about potential drug interactions, especially if I have any concerns about my adrenal health.
You're absolutely right. It's always a good idea to talk to your doctor.
Always a good idea. About any medications you're taking, especially if you're experiencing any unusual symptoms.
So if anything seems off.
Yeah,
Huh.
it can help you weigh the risks and benefits and make sure you're not inadvertently putting your adrenal glands in a tough spot.
Right. Yeah, like I said, it's like a minefield out there.
It can be.
You gotta be really careful.
And here's another thing to consider.
Okay.
It's not just about drugs that directly block cortisol production.
Okay.
There are also medications that can actually speed up how quickly your body breaks down cortisol.
Oh, wow. So even if you're producing enough, you're just burning through it too quickly.
Right.
Okay.
Things like phenytoin,
Phenytoin.
barbiturates,
Barbiturates.
and rifampin can fall into this category.
Rifampin.
Okay. So those are things to be aware of as well.
Okay. So if my body is already struggling to make enough cortisol, and then I take a medication that makes me burn through it even faster,
Right.
that's obviously not a good combination.
It's a recipe for trouble.
Like trying to fill a leaky bucket. Yeah. It's just not going to work.
Not a good situation.
No.
Now, before we wrap up,
Okay.
I want to touch on one last factor that's a little less clear-cut, but still worth mentioning: severe inflammatory disease.
Okay. So are we talking about things like rheumatoid arthritis or
Yeah.
Crohn's disease?
Exactly.
Conditions where inflammation is a key part of the problem.
Right. Conditions where inflammation is a key part of the problem.
Okay.
There's some emerging research suggesting that when your body is dealing with intense, widespread inflammation,
Mm-hmm.
your cortisol levels might actually drop.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So it's like my body is so focused on fighting the inflammation that it forgets about everything else.
That's a great analogy.
Kind of like when you're so busy putting out a fire that you forget to eat lunch.
Exactly. But we're still figuring out exactly how this works.
So more research is needed.
More research is definitely needed.
Okay.
Does the inflammation directly suppress cortisol production? Does the body divert cortisol to other tasks? There's a lot more research to be done.
It's like a puzzle that scientists are still trying to piece together.
Exactly.
But it's fascinating to think about how interconnected everything is in our bodies.
It really is.
Who knew that inflammation in one part of the body could potentially affect something like cortisol production in the adrenal glands?
It really highlights the complexity of human physiology.
It really does.
And speaking of complexity, I think it's time for us to shift gears and talk about the big picture.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from tuberculosis to autoimmunity, infections, hemorrhages, cancer, medications, and even inflammation.
It's a lot.
It's amazing to think about all the different things that can affect these tiny but mighty adrenal glands.
They are mighty.
They are essential for so many bodily functions.
Absolutely.
And it makes you wonder, as we learn more about autoimmune diseases and how they're becoming more prevalent, what does the future hold for Addison's disease?
That's a great question. Are we headed for an epidemic?
That's one that researchers and healthcare providers are grappling with.
Yeah.
If more and more people are developing autoimmune conditions, it stands to reason that we might see a corresponding increase in Addison's disease cases.
Right, because it's one of those conditions that can be caused by autoimmunity.
And if that happens, we need to be prepared.
Okay, so what does being prepared look like?
Well, for starters, we need to get better at early diagnosis.
Early diagnosis is always key.
Absolutely. The earlier we catch Addison's disease, the better the chances of preventing serious complications.
Right.
And one way to do that might be to consider routinely screening certain high-risk groups for adrenal insufficiency.
Hold on. If early detection is so important, why aren't we routinely screening for Addison's disease already?
You're not wrong, but there are a lot of factors to consider.
Like what?
Cost is always a big one.
Yeah, cost is always a factor.
Then there's the question of practicality. How do we effectively screen large populations?
Right.
And we also need to think about the accuracy of the tests themselves. We don't want to be giving people unnecessary stress and worry if the tests aren't reliable.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a complex issue, but it's definitely something that researchers and healthcare providers are thinking about.
Okay, so early detection is crucial, but what about treatment?
Thankfully, we've come a long way in managing Addison's disease.
Okay, that's good to hear.
Hormone replacement therapy is very effective.
Okay.
And with careful monitoring, people with this condition can live full and active lives.
So it's not a death sentence.
Absolutely not.
That's reassuring to hear. It sounds like we've taken this once mysterious and scary disease and turned it into something we can control.
That's a great way to put it.
We've demystified it and given people hope.
I like the way you put that.
Yeah.
We've come a long way, and there's always more to learn.
Always.
And as we wrap up our deep dive into Addison's disease, I want to leave you with this thought. The immune system is a powerful force.
It is.
Capable of both amazing protection and incredible destruction. Understanding its complexities is key to unlocking new treatments for so many diseases, including Addison's.
What a great takeaway. We've only scratched the surface of what we know about the immune system.
Just the tip of the iceberg.
And there's so much more to discover.
Absolutely.
Who knows what breakthroughs lie ahead? Maybe one day we'll be able to prevent autoimmune diseases altogether.
Yeah, it would be incredible.
But for now, knowledge is power. And with awareness and understanding, we can face the challenges of Addison's disease head on.
Well said. And remember, if you have any concerns about your adrenal health, don't hesitate to reach out to your healthcare provider.
Your doctor.
They can help you navigate the complexities of diagnosis and management,
Absolutely.
ensuring you receive the best possible care.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Addison's disease.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you found it informative and maybe even a little bit empowering.
My pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.